the final thing we're going to go over for supply and demand separately is putting these two things together. This is an introduction to supply and demand is together. So we went over them individually. So we had price and quantity, and we had our supply curve, and we had price and quantity, and we had our demand curve, which slopes down. So at some point, if we put these on the same graph, they're going to intersect. So if we move supply curve to this graph right here, we're going to have our supply and demand. But what happens at the point they intersect? At the price that the supplier produces a certain quantity, and the demander will buy that quantity at that certain price also, that's our equilibrium. It's the price that the supplier will sell a certain number of goods at a certain price with the price that a demander or a consumer will buy a certain number of goods at that price also. That's our equilibrium. The equilibrium tells us what price a market is going to sell its goods at and how many goods are going to be produced. That's what the equilibrium tells us. It's a very, very important concept. Now there are two little extra terms we need to talk about before we go on to the next session. And that is excess supply. And that is when we have too much supply. So when quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, price is going to fall. So if we're at this point right here, so the quantity is more than we demand, it's going to shift down until we reach equilibrium. And if we have an excess demand, there's a huge demand for a small number of products, price is going to rise, people are going to demand less, and suppliers are also going to produce more. And eventually we're going to get to this equilibrium point, which this equilibrium point tells us, hey, for widgets, which is a good we're making, how much quantity is the market going to produce, and what is the price going to be?